to remind you to record. Oh, there it is.
And we'll hit the hello. Let's see. Hello, Leslie Allen. I'm so pleased to have Leslie Allen here for our fourth interview of Inside the Mind of an Artist, where I get to interview people that I love and people that I want to know more about, of how they were influenced and how they got to the painting practice or art practice that they did. And so we will be doing a dive today with Leslie, who is an American painter who's been in a serious love affair with painting for over 60 years. She's originally from El Paso, Texas, and the Rio Grande borderline, which is between New Mexico and Texas. Leslie has now lived and worked in Sausalito, California for 34 years. And she works in a place called the Industrial Center Building in Sausalito, California, which is how I got to meet Leslie, being there for what I call now my art residency for 2 years. Leslie is represented by Kennedy Contemporary, which is in Newport Beach, and Seeger Gray Gallery, which is in Mill Valley, California. Her works reside in private and public collections throughout the United States, as well as in London, United Kingdom, in France, Dusseldorf, and Germany, and Switzerland. Leslie studied graphic design and pre-law before settling in the Bay Area and has since maintained, she's a hard worker, she has since maintained dual careers in both art and in law. And as she describes herself as an amateur cellist, I guess from what I read, she was away from playing the cello for 50 years and has since gone back. So we're going to hear more about that and how that integrates with the art that she makes. So she worked for many years at George Lucas Film Company, where she had the pivotal chance to commune with his extensive art collection. And she describes this experience as the kickstart to her many years of art studies, and credits the mastery of the teachers that came before her: Mark Adams, Thomas Marsh, and Chester Arnold. It was Arnold, her decades-long mentor, who urged her to paint in oils. From then, Leslie Allen, has shot for the sun with full-blown expressive abstraction. In the words of Chester, who is an illusionistic oil painter, Leslie's ignition was brilliant, and the subsequent years of work have continued to amaze and delight lovers of high octane abstraction. Welcome, Leslie.
Thank you, Lauren, so much for having me. And it's so good to see you, talk to you, and experience this great opportunity. I think I'll spring off that comment that Chester made to say that when I think high octane abstraction, I don't necessarily think of my work, but I imagined that he was referencing what I had done before abstraction, which was pretty true landscape painting, plein air painting, figurative painting, and I have a great love of cartooning and drawing, and so that was all grounded in realistic work. So it was a leap to go in the direction of big, juicy oils with an anything goes approach.
And I know that before we get into your paintings, that you also have a very improvisational style, like how that kind of evolved. And what I'm really curious to know is, you're saying that you sort of allow music now to drive your action painting. Would you call it action?
Sure, I would call it action. I mean, I do feel like most of my paintings are responsive to whatever I'm listening to. And in the years since I recognized that that's how I was responding to music, it would just drive what I was doing in painting, I've come to appreciate, and I've had some clinical studies with synesthesia. and recognize that a lot of what I do is intricately connected to the music, in that it is a feeling, a color. When I play music, I see painting, I see color, I see form, and they're much more intertwined than I had understood. I have kind of wonky, crossed senses in a way that a lot of people do. About 20% of the population has the type of synesthesia that I have. It's very, very common, and it's super common among creative people. So I feel the music when I'm painting, and I feel the painting when I'm playing music. And
When
it
did
was,
you discover that? I mean, I didn't really know what synesthesia was till I started really looking at the works of Joan Mitchell, who we are
that's
going to get to.
exactly, it's exactly when it dawned on me that what I had been experiencing was described in a biography I read about her, and it was a riveting
I read that.
realization. And at first I thought, gosh, isn't this amazing what she describes? And then the more I started talking to other people about it, I realized it was no different than what I experienced. If I looked at somebody and that somebody seemed yellow to me, and I would identify that person with the color yellow, I mean, something about that person's aura. And the way that, I have some other connections that are sensory, they're drawn upon experiences that are not necessarily part of synesthesia, or it doesn't fit so neatly in that package. But I've come to understand that it is not so weird to have these senses crossed and have a smell evoke a color, have that color evoke music, have that music evoke an action that I would do in drawing or painting, or have numbers or letters signify things that have a different meaning for me now that I've come to understand what she was experiencing and actually battling for a bit. She had trouble with it.
So
And
you're
now,
saying that 20% of the population actually experience this? I
this
mean,
particular type of synesthesia, I'm told, is becoming more and more common as it's understood. More and more people are reporting that, oh, this is what happens to them, and they thought they were weird, and they just kind of swallowed it. And the more they talk about it, the more they, other neurological functions and dysfunctions are discovered. It's recognized as being much more common
yeah,
than was
it makes me
understood.
think of Oliver Sacks,
Oh yeah,
wrote the book, I'm mistaking my
the
hat.
man who mistook his hat for a book, or his book for a hat,
Yeah,
or his wife
yeah.
for a book, or whatever it
I
was.
read that at a very young age, and it really affected me because it made me think about me, myself as an artist, but I can relate this to other creatives of, we think so abstractly, even those that don't paint abstractly, that and it's almost like taking quantum physics or geometry. When you really understand geometry, it becomes almost musical.
Yes.
Like it's a dance that is not in this 3D world.
Right.
And I really have no words to describe it. And that's probably what you're saying. There are no words to describe it.
Well,
So
I'm sure there's some neurologist out there, and endocrinologist, and
yes,
scientists that and many other forms of very scientific professionals that have an understanding of this and would laugh at our
I
pseudo
know, exactly.
scientific
I
talk
know.
about it. But
But
so
hey, we
uh,
get to
but
interpret
hey,
it.
that brings us back to the painting and the music and how they seem to relate, and how much I feel more in common with people who talk about this than I
Yeah.
used to feel, because it's like it was there, and if I said anything about it, it's sort of like, okay, that's another indication of your craziness. Okay,
Yeah.
all right, I'll
Well,
buy
great.
that.
I'm crazy.
Just kind of wipe it away.
I'm gonna kind of dive in here and
Sure.
go to our slides and see in our presentation, which, by the way, I had started it with. I'm gonna go to
Oh,
play.
this is fun to see.
I'm gonna play. Yeah, that's right. Leslie Allen, American painter. Paint is for loving, seriously, even house paint.
Yes.
You want to riff on that just a little bit? Tell me.
Well, I think about paint is for lovers, lovers of paint, lovers of other people, and then plain old loving. And then I think paint is for everyone. I mean, who doesn't love, playing with color? And I didn't enjoy coloring when they were young. And this has just grown out of that. And I feel so lucky. We're so lucky to have been encouraged to let it grow.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And here you are in your studio, and knowing being down the hall for you for a couple of years back in the early 2000s, I love that you were kind of as messy as I was. I know that you were reining it in because you had an architect as a studio mate.
Right.
Super tidy. Remember him.
It was a natural reminder for me. I had to keep it clean for someone else. So that was kind of a new experience, but it was really pretty great. It moved me toward mindfulness about cleaning up, which only excited me about going back in. So that was one of the countless benefits of that arrangement. That was great.
That is a good point. Whenever I clean the studio, it kind of will ignite a freshness and an inspiration. So here you are in your studio, and it actually, thinking about it, it is a little tidy.
Yeah.
You've got all your brayers just so, and you paint with brayers and scrape. Tell us a little. You paint with, what are your main tools?
I paint with everything. I do love brayers. I love knives. Really tell me any kind of material, anything that you can hold in your hand, and why it's not a material. It's something to either add or subtract. And so anything goes. I have lots of, I don't know, knitting needles and crochet hooks and X-Acto knives and thread, yarn. I mean, all sorts of things go into laying down paint or pulling it back up.
So do you find that you're a builder of paint, or are you really in that articulation of the weave of I'm reductive as much as additive, and there's this balance in between the two?
I think I actually do more subtractive work than I do additive work. It has to get down, I think, in terms of layers, and I think that goes back to the synesthesia. Everything is layers for me. Some people, perceive in the synesthesia conversation that, if you think of blue and yellow next to each other, they blend, and in your mind you come up with a green, and it's not that way for me. They're all distinct. They're all layers. They sit on top of one another. And I had painted in watercolors for about 25 years before I made the shift to oils. I use oils in the same way I did watercolors. It was really about building layers. I wasn't a wet and wet painter. Instead, I did glazes. So I love laying down the glazes. And sometimes there's a lot of dirty, ugly, horrible stuff that goes onto a canvas because I know I'm going to paint over it. I'm going to resolve my emotions in some way such that I come away with something that I feel, maybe others will resonate with. But there may be some really ugly graffiti layers underneath, and sometimes very beautiful, gorgeous layers of color like stained glass that I will go over with black. So, yeah. And then I love all the erasure processes, the ways you can pull up paint with knives and paper towels and pure scraping and, putting down tape and pulling back tape. All those things are fun tricks, but ultimately it has to be a painting that speaks about the thing it's going to be, not all the processes.
Fair question. Is color more important than the shape to you?
No, they're equal. They sit in equal worlds.
Okay. So I'm going to move on to that second. I pulled this, and what I love about it is that's you playing the cello with your
my youngest grandbaby, who was in my care for a while, and it was a lot of juggling I was having to do to take care of at that age, to be taking care of a newborn, and I went about. Pardon me.
What year was that?
Well, she's 6 years old now. And so she was, in my life from her birth. And anyway, this was a way that I dealt with. I'm going to be candid and say the trauma of having a baby in my life and what it did, just all the circumstances around that, which were rather tragic, and how to make it beautiful, beautiful for her life, beautiful for mine. And I really was so thrilled that I was newish with the cello so much that I had to play it every day, all the time, every chance I got, around my job, around my studio, around my family life. And she just was a part of that. And I loved having her on my lap, under the back of the cello, feeling it through her. And I tried to imagine how beautiful the world would be if every baby got a chance to do something like that. So
What
it
a
was a
healing
really
calm.
good experience.
That's a healing calm. Ooh, you've got people talking in the Sausalito ICB building. Thank you for sharing that, Leslie. That was
Sure.
beautiful. And
Thank
that
you.
just goes to say that life is art and art is life. And
Indeed. Indeed.
so I'm going to start here with a little bit of some of your influences. And this catalog really struck me. Color and Ire 1, I Am a Painter by Paul Klee. Works from 1879. He was 1879 to 1940. That was his life. I was like, wait, that's wrong.
Oh, he was so ahead of his time.
Yeah.
Just amazing. And this is an example of the kind of layering that I loved in watercolors, that I love in stained glass, that I love to see in any kind of a tapestry of color. Where colors are not just sitting side by side, but they're letting you in. They're sitting on top. They're receding, and they're all also distinct. And I grew to love Paul Klee for a simple quote that everybody knows, which is basically on drawing. He encouraged everyone to take a line for a walk. And I thought that's so basic. It's such an easy thing you can tell a child. Just take a line for a walk. Doesn't matter if it's a stick. Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's a stick you're dragging in the sand or whether it's charcoal on paper, whatever. And yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the next piece, and I didn't get the title into this.
So this piece is called Notre Dame, that Matisse drew from the perspective of a restaurant across the river. And it blew my mind when I saw it for the first time. And within weeks of seeing it, I then read a biography of Richard Diebenkorn. I had seen his work for a really long time. But when I actually read the biography, read the text, it was a catalog, and he referred back to this painting as being pivotal for him. I don't know, I felt a connection. It was something that went deep in my gut, and it took me to Notre Dame to go see it. I wanted to see exactly how that abstraction could occur, and it was wonderful. That was the first thing I sought out when I went to Paris. And
So what year he did this?
Oh gosh, I don't even remember. How embarrassing! I don't remember the year.
It's okay. But I guess my question to you is, on a guttural level, on an emotional level, what do you assume later, all these years later, was what moved you so much within the abstraction of this, of how he could have done it?
Well, it was his reduction of all of the elements, all of the noise around that structure, and the river and the bridge and the bushes, the shadows, the light, the simplicity, that it was reduced to the simplest sketch. And it was sort of an affirmation that no matter what you're doing in your sketchbook, that you will be able to reduce everything that you're looking at to simple bones and design and good design. And I think that this could be, I arrived at this after many years of drawing, but it could be a start for people who are beginning their drawing life. I keep coming back to it. I never tire of it. I think it's absolutely beautiful. And I don't know.
I mean, I know that you teach too.
Mhm.
on your spare time. Uh, and if someone came to you and said, do I really need to know how to draw before I paint? What would you say to them?
Well, I hate to push people towards something they don't want to do. When somebody wants to know how to draw, I want them to have all the tools available to them to help them do that. If they want to dive into being rich and famous right away and bypass the whole drawing thing, I think it's going to show. And I will say, just know people will know the difference, but it may not make a difference. They'll know the distinction between someone who can draw and someone who can't, but it may not make a difference in your career, your pursuit, or whatever.
Now something that comes to mind immediately for all you out there, Cy Twombly, the way he
Yes,
used his marks, right?
right.
There is, I think, an expertise when you at least command your hand it doesn't, well, I say hand-eye coordination, even if it's gesture or just being like, take your line for a walk over,
Yes.
over and over and over again. That's a sense of drawing. It doesn't have to be 1 point perspective. I mean, I'm just curious what you might think. Does it have to be 1 point, 2 point? Do I have to have
No. I can tell you the story of an attorney that I worked for I worked for him for 33 years, and he was a really creative, very, very creative, and adored. He was a respected attorney, and I used to marvel at what he did as he sat at his desk with his great big huge calendar pad in front of him, and he made Cy Twomblys over and over and over and over again. He was a frustrated architect. He just never, or he a wannabe architect, and his brother-in-law was a very, very famous architect. And he kept saying, I just wish I had studied architecture. I wish I had. And then I looked at all of these beautiful drawings that he had made over all those years and wished that I had gathered all of those. They were brilliant. And he expressed form. It was, you make those marks over and over again. You're creating the belly of something, and then it
you own
drifts
them?
off to
They
nowhere.
become
And
yours. Yeah.
that's right. And I think Cy Twombly was fantastic. He got a lot of criticism, but that drawing certainly is as valid as any other.
And I look at this. So here's one of your paintings, Jazz on Tap. It's actually one of your newer works. I think you did this in
Yes.
2021. And this one doesn't have the size, but I believe it's 48 by 48. Am I
I
correct?
think this one might be 40 by 40. It could even be 50 by 50, but
I
somewhere in
want
that
you all
range.
out there, this audience, to notice how she is drawing with paint. I mean, what a master. She
Thank
is
you.
drawing with paint. Anything you want to
Yeah.
say about this particular painting?
No, that just, I can say one thing, and that's that as I've encouraged with everybody I've given lessons to, and somebody passed it on to me, and I can't remember who, how important it is to find a shape to begin with, just your shape. My shape is bottles. I just chose bottles and archways. I really like a lot. When I don't know how to begin, I will always start with a bottle shape. So that figure that's in the lower left-hand side, that
Whoops.
black,
Whoops, sorry.
that's okay. That little black shape down on the bottom next to those yellow ochre and amid
Yeah.
the white, that's a bottle. I just started there. Let's put a bottle down. And oh, then there's a bottle above that might also be a guitar. Or maybe that's going to be the belly of my cello. And so on. I'll move along. But those are just little sketches, little bones where I'm beginning. Those may get painted over and then reawakened. I may scrape back to find them again, like go excavate to find where did I put those bottles. So yes, so I'm drawing with paint until I figure out how I want to lay it all down.
Wonderful, thank you. I love how you stated that. For me, it's a vessel. It's like a boat vessel.
Perfect.
Paint it over, but it might not. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little here about some of your influences and your
Oh,
style.
Corot, genius of Corot. As I mentioned,
Tell us more.
I had painted landscapes, plein air, for a very long time, and Corot was my god. I would look to his paintings, whether simple structures in a field of flowers, or an entry to a long roadway, a long roadway entry to a grand property or whatever. And all I could focus on, and I just urge everybody looking at this to just squint and look at the lights and the darks. And then you have your abstract painting, how abstract this really is. And yet it's representing a real place in the most beautiful color. I just think it's exquisite. And I could look, everything that Corot ever painted, I love. And so I just don't, I'd encourage people to look back to masters and all different types of artwork. I mean, it's figure paintings and even really tight portraiture lends itself to an abstract viewing if you're willing to go there.
All painting is abstract, really. If
Yes.
you put it upside down, it's just a series of color next to color and shapes. And yeah, this is beautiful. Okay, so this is one of your early works, and it's going to it precedes, and the year of this is it 2019? Am I correct?
2009.
Nine,
Yes,
yeah. Yeah.
I think it's 2009. I did two of them. So Ode to Joan 1 and 2 were done a year apart. So one I painted and the other was a commission based on the first one. So actually I did 3 of them. So I think this is the middle one. Yeah, it would be Ode to Joan 2. So 2009, and you know, it's a direct response to you know, my love affair with the paintings of Joan Mitchell. There's no getting away from it.
This is a large piece. I don't know how clear this image, you know, it's really hard to get an idea. I mean, I did do this, so you can get an idea of the scale of Joan Mitchell's work and the scope of her size. And this is right around there.
This is also large. In fact, this is even cropped from a larger, it's a larger piece than what we're looking at. Okay. And, you know, she's kind of a tough person to take reading about her. You know, it's like her life separate from her artwork. So I think she's amazing. I think her mark making was amazing. Her color is amazing. And the formal aspects within, and this seems like it has no design in it, but au contraire, it's definitely there.
Talk about that a little bit.
Well, you know, there are lots of schools of thought about the importance of design in paintings, good design. I will say that my takeaway and my giveaway is that you want to keep the viewer engaged. And design is one of the ways you do that. But you need to let the viewer out of the piece they're engaged with as well to move along. You want them to experience the whole thing and be able to exit having experienced the whole thing. Design is just one of the devices that makes that possible.
That was well said. I always think you want to not give it all away, have something that holds some interest. I was recently reading, or somebody was telling me about an art instructor out there that has lots and lots of students who come to their program. And they had a conversation about, I know Joan Mitchell just had a show in San Francisco about, you know, what do you think? And they must have been beginner students because many of them just were left with the idea of, oh, I wouldn't hang that above my couch. And I'm like, oh my God, that's a whole topic of what is art? Like, what is that comment?
Get rid of the couch.
Yeah. I want somebody to ask me questions. Yeah, that's good. Okay. So another one of your earlier works that I pulled that I think I remember from your from the studio when you were working. So this must have been in the 2000s.
Yeah, you were here when I did I did 3 of these, and this was the first. I did another that was a commission piece based on this, but had lots of different, I mean, it was definitely related, but it had lots of different elements in it. So I called this Under the Sun, and had various reprises to the under the sun painting. And really, it represented that. I've just thrown everything under the sun into this piece. And some of it I took away and some of it I didn't. And within this, you'll see references to representational works that were done by other people. I received postcards in the mail. At that time, we were all getting postcards of artwork. And there was a painter whose work I really loved. I've never met her. Her last name is Maize, M-A-I-Z-E. Her work is absolutely phenomenal. And I wanted to do a whole abstract work that was really about honoring her very, very small still lives that are so gorgeous. So under that little crescent moon, you'll see in that big vessel, there is a rectangle that is a still life that is based on, and it's about the size of the postcard that she painted. So I just set about reproducing her work as a little window you could go into. And it was like a way to honor people who were painting in a style I wasn't, and to show reverence for their work.
Leslie, I also remember at the time, now that I'm really looking at this piece, there was a collagist, come on, you can do
A
it.
collagist,
Collagist, it sounded odd. Based out of the Bay Area, who was that? We were all looking at him.
Oh my gosh, there's so many now. I can't even think of who specifically.
Kind of, well, I'll have to drop the subject.
Okay, it's probably going to hit us at about midnight tonight.
Yes.
We'll both arrive at it. Let's call each other.
Now, Diebenkorn. Now, I'm going to say Diebenkorn is really big, especially in the Bay Area, because Diebenkorn is from the Bay Area. But I also know he spent some time in Albuquerque. He spent some time here, and here's one of his paintings. So I did choose this. I see the influence of the abstract, but I also see a lot of Bay Area artists emulating the landscape, sort of
right.
abstracted landscape. But his sophistication is. And then I'm going to have you fill in the blank.
I will. His sophistication is above reproach. He was able, because I believe, because he knew how to draw really well, really, really well. And he had done many years of representational work, and then he kind of moved away from it. His figurative work always left something unspoken and left, a viewer's eye to fill in. He had great reverence for objects and for shapes. I mean, that landscape that you're going between these two styles are very, very, very different. But I mean, I just think this is, to me, a love affair with shadows. It's just incredible. And it doesn't get any better than that. And really, I mean, I stood before this painting probably 30 or 40 times when I had the chance. I kept going back to the show to see this and learning, how did he do that? How did he do that green? How did he make that gorgeous lavender? What colors did he mix? And it's a really simple painting that just says everything about light and about simplicity and about shape. And one of the things that I regarded most about Diebenkorn was his description of the landscapes that he saw in aerial views, 1 to 1,000 feet above the ground, all over California and New Mexico and Chicago. He did a whole Berkeley series as well, and those are all very different. And he was informed very much about geometry from the aerial trips.
Well, I also spent a lot of time on planes, private planes, being able to see landscape. And looking at Diebenkorn and how you might approach it, which we'll be getting, with some of your paintings. What's the difference for you? Like, what have you taken away from that experience?
Well, what I took away from it is that I wanted to get my butt in planes and be able to fly like that and take pictures like that. And I had the great privilege, I'm going to call it that, of being able to do that. And, I thank Barry Peterson for that, and his friend Jerry, who, I just had an opportunity to fly with both of them and do exactly what I had read Diebenkorn had done and be moved in exactly the same way. And there's no going back. I feel like it informs all the marks that I make now.
Lovely. Well, okay, so here's a new painting, Fireflies.
Yeah.
Tell us.
That painting is actually behind me. It's over one of my shoulders. Let's see, there it is. So it's behind me, and this was an exercise on directly on panel, as opposed to canvas over panels, and it was born out of necessity. I lost the person who was making my canvases for me, and I started using panels directly and thought, wow, this is a whole new thing. I have to respond to this very differently. The way paint works on it, the way it's removed, the way it runs, everything was very different. So it was an exploration. And, out of it, I had a little experience with a starburst cluster that happens in there that evoked fireflies for me and brought back a whole world of experiences I had as a child, first seeing fireflies. And I don't know. I love this
Which
painting.
came first? Just the unconscious being in or the subconscious as you're working, and then you're like, oh, I just painted a memory, or is it the memory and then
It's
all you think of
interesting.
it?
Yeah, it was actually the quality of the little yellow dots that I got there, which came from subtractive work. I sprayed my medium onto the panel, and I let it rest for a little bit, and then blotted it, and so it's come back to the underpainting. So that's a subtractive method that left me feeling they're little fuzzy spots. They would not look the same if I had painted those little dots onto the piece. So it was a function of learning how to push pull quite differently on panel than I had on canvas or on the canvases I was using. And it just took me back to a place. And then there's lots of other little references to a particular summer of my lifetime in this painting. Much of it has been removed, but not all of it. So there's little elements in there that would be meaningful to my brother and to my aunt, but probably to nobody else. But
Well, you never know, what gets evoked in people.
true.
Okay, tell it full stop.
Full Stop is a title that I've given to a diptych that also on panel. So this was the last piece. This diptych was I don't think the other piece is in this slideshow. I'm not positive, but fermata and grand pause are two types of notation that you have in music. And I'm playing in a college symphony orchestra, and this was the feeling I have of what we were playing. And it was very, very, very powerful, and it was very heavy on brass, and it had very distinct pauses in the music that allowed your senses to settle back down, very, very, very quiet, before the strings came crashing back in. And I I had so much fun making these paintings because I felt myself in the orchestra as I was painting. And it was so nice to go back into the performance of that piece and feel the painting come back to me through the playing of the music.
That's
So,
cool. A full memory painting.
yes, yes.
Okay, so this is an influence, and I'd love to hear why you chose this piece. What a great drawing! Oh my!
Isn't that amazing? So I
Yes.
think this is a lithograph, actually. When I was working at Lucasfilm, a friend of mine who became the procurer of George Lucas at the beginning, she was the curator of his early collection. I worked in the admin offices where he frequented, and all of the other things that were going on with, all of the senior officials in in the business. Were that this was the first building to get adorned with beautiful pieces of contemporary art. And this piece was one in a series of lithos that he did. I think it was 10 or 12, something like that, maybe even more than that, that were drawings or lithographs. I mean, even though they were prints, they're drawn, of tools and his reverence for tools. He did all sorts of wacky drawings. He was really a very fun guy. I loved his homage to tools, and to even going back to his childhood feeling of what it was like to hold a hammer for the first time, or an axe, or picks, or screwdrivers, all of that. And I got to be greeted by this every day when I came into work, not just this, but 3 others that were in this series. And, it suddenly became something that informed my drawing style. I really liked all of that little sketchy stuff. And you see Cy Twombly's little, scribbles in there. That is a way to suggest so much. And it took me away from all of that precision drawing where we had to stay within lines. And if you're going to go out of bounds, there had to be a real reason. This was boundless. It was just so great. And yet it was a love affair with tools.
And the gesture of energy, that's how I see it. Like you can,
and all that empty space that drew all of the attention to the weighted line that is at the head of this tool. I mean, that dark line that outlines just part of it is what gives it dimensionality. And I just think it's glorious.
It is glorious. Okay, so here's one of your mentors, Chester Arnold.
Yes, and my favorite among all mentors. Talk about boundless. There is nothing this guy hasn't painted, hasn't thought, hasn't done. He's miraculous. He's just amazing.
In not Sebastopol. Where was he?
Well, he's presently having a couple of really fine shows. I think one of his shows closed yesterday. He's at the Fresno Museum of Art right now, I believe, and some really great retrospectives. He's gained a lot of attention for very good reason. And he was at College of Marin probably the longest of his teaching stints. And I don't know, I just say that he's been my teacher since, so I don't know, 1988, 87, 88, I think. I was in the first class that he came in to teach as a substitute for another instructor who'd been in a bad accident, and had to have been the best classroom experience I have ever had, and I know every one of my classmates as well, and then Chester talks about that fondly as well. It was one magical class of students matched with probably a very nervous teacher who set us all ablaze. All of us were moved by what he did that year, and it just never stopped. And
sometimes
he's a force.
Magical moments happen.
He's got thousands and thousands of followers, and I just happened to be among one of the lucky, very, very lucky students to have been truly inspired by everything he did. I traveled with him and his wife to Paris, and that was and a group of people, and that was pretty magical. And I don't know, it's just
what a wonderful tribute.
Something else, yeah. And he continues to inspire.
I love this painting. There's
Thank you.
There's like a marching order, but at the same time, there's this playfulness, and I'm able to rest down on the bottom. Like I could almost be looking up at it, taking it.
Thank you,
like
Lauren.
Yes.
Thank you. This was painted as a mate to the Firefly painting, and at one time they were in the same orientation, and they were meant to be one painting. So the area in the Firefly painting where there's kind of a large void fills it was a big void, and actually it formed one great big arch. They got separated, and the orientation on Fireflies changed to vertical. This was inspired by a musical march within a piece that I was playing. And it was really fun on the cello. It was all doable for me. I would say I'm the neophyte in the cello section of our orchestra. I'm the least experienced. And so it's all exciting for me. I'm just like a child at this age. It's like giving up all hopes of having, been a musician for life. It's just like, okay, well, I'm having fun now. This is a representation of that fun I'm having going along on a musical march. And there is a series of feathers that are appearing, because there's some lightness that I was feeling in the music. And to me, it felt like feathers floating and then dropping. And, I'll just say I had some real sensory crossovers in this. There are pieces in this painting that remind me of particular people that play in my orchestra and particular sounds their instruments were making. And, even one guy that was wearing a shirt that had 2 buttons broken at his large middle, he makes an appearance here with 1 button, 2 buttons missing, and then another bottom button somewhere like in an area of the painting. And it's just like wackiness like that is all okay. And this is a hello to Oakland's art murmur that happens frequently, where throngs of people, go pour into the streets to go see art. And it was made during a time that the art murmur stopped for reasons of our pandemic. Nobody was hopping into the streets to go see art. Artists weren't having their artworks viewed in ways that they were accustomed. All of that swell quieted down. And I tried to just record really what it feels like to have all of this cacophony on a canvas. It's more than a murmur. It's when it's silent. More than a murmur, to me, was the silence of the murmur. And now it's only sitting there visually and not really being heard.
Is this one of the paintings that you do have multiple layers of adding and subtracting, or did this painting happen more of a building?
This painting was built over about 2 months of pretty steady addition and subtraction. Okay. And then when it was all finished, I let it sit for about two months maybe, and then painted ivory black over the entire thing in a very, very, very deep dark glaze, and then selectively wiped it back. So what you're not seeing is all of this was just fluorescent color. It was on fire color, and it's been muted by the glazing. And the glazing even went on over the very, very white center, which was painted pretty much last in, in lead paint, basically. So the black wipes away very easily. So it's just glazed in a very traditional style of glazing, but you wouldn't know it looking at it. It looks like just a busy poster.
No,
up close you can see it. In the painting, you can actually see the glazing better than you do in a photograph.
Now, for the first time, it's very busy, but you know what what I never noticed, and it's interesting that I notice it in one of your busier paintings, or crowded, I should say, as opposed to busy, is you do sign your name on the surface.
Yes. Yeah, I do.
And I always like to ask artists this question is, why on the front versus the back? I mean, I know that the back has been a contemporary way, maybe in the last 50 years or so. Sure. And if you have an opinion on that.
It's not a real opinion. I just have a practice. Because this is canvassed, stretched over a panel, I do sign it on the back, but the canvas can come right off the panel, in which case it's not painted on the back. My signature isn't on the back. Gotcha. I like the architectural addition of a signature on the front. I do not like large, sweeping, calligraphic signatures that have what I call ta-da, done by so-and-so, ta-da. It takes away from the painting. So I do like to integrate my signature in somehow. If I have done a lot of scratching in the painting, I'll scratch my signature. If I've done a lot of adding.
Now I'm like looking, because it's the first time I noticed it, Leslie.
And it's funny because I also have a practice when I'm getting ready for exhibit of making a spreadsheet that has the name of the painting, whether it's been photographed or not, whether it's signed, whether the sides are finished, whether, the finished element of it, and the signature is one of the things that I check mark. Have I signed it? And it's like my way of saying it's done and it's varnished. And yeah, so the signature appears on every painting on the face.
I
I'm
see it now
pretty
in this
sure.
one, yeah.
And I can add
Why
sometimes
would he
it will
show
be
this
in
one?
4 corners because many of my paintings are meant to be, if they're square paintings, not even just square, but mostly square, I try to paint them so that the design might hold up in other orientations.
You
So
know,
sometimes you'll see my signature in other corners.
this is the second time I've showed this. It's in there twice. But it just hit me what this reminds me of. Taos Pueblo.
Thank
Taos
you. I'm going
Pueblo.
to say thank you because
Because
the
I've got
Pueblo
it.
is one of my very favorite places on earth, and
And
I've spent a lot of time there.
if people don't know it, it is one of, if not the oldest thriving, when people still live there, Pueblo
Right.
that we have in the United States. And it's just rich. Like they own a lot of land, they have a lot of money, they've got a lot of, they still do their dances there. They're just, it's just amazing. But it's reminding me right here, like entranceways. And when you see it, it's like stacked on these adobes that are just built.
Right. Right.
And that's what it made me think of. And then the river is right there. And anyway,
Thank you, Lauren. I'll take that.
fantasizing.
I was born in New Mexico and I have a great love of New Mexico. So,
And how does the
thank
Rio
you.
Grande play into your work now? Like you wrote something about that sort of separation, but
Well,
Alan, regarding the
yeah.
river as a symbol of two nations united by endless challenges and possibilities, and its twin identity as a metaphor for her own challenge resolutions in life.
Yeah. I think I can't say it any better. I mean, I grew up, witnessing all sorts of challenges among people. It's us versus them, and yet we were all living together. I went over the bridge frequently with my family to grocery shop in Mexico. Several of us in my family married Mexican people and have Mexican grandchildren, and that was all something kind of new in my childhood. That was, I was, having to come to terms with people having opposition because of their color and their country and what's this all about? And then we have this river separating us, and then the Chamizal Treaty was a very important occurrence in my childhood. And what did that treaty mean? And the relations between Mexico and the United States. And then so recently, even in our just previous presidency, and all of the issues that kind of flow from that, they're still reverberating, they're reverberating again. And I think about it all the time. And when people fight, I think, God, and there's no getting away from thinking about it just this very day and what's happening across.
Do you come to El Paso and cross into Juarez now, or?
It has actually become a place I don't cross into. When I go to El Paso, I don't think of going into Juarez anymore. It's become dangerous to do that. Or I mean,
Well, they just built a community called Santa Teresa, which is
yes.
for the rail yard, which was a whole planned community. And I'm not sure what happened with it now, but that had,
Oh, I could go off on a completely different
well,
tangent on all of this. I have, you know, a, it's a great heartache, actually, a lot of heartache surrounding what has become El Paso. People of El Paso are wonderful. They're really, really wonderful. My childhood, it was fraught with problems, but it was really magical, as compared to childhoods that I see all around me. Um, and it's, you know, it's just not what it used to be.
and I wonder if, that duality that you carry because you work from an emotional stance is in almost all your paintings, or do you find that, oh, look at that, here, look, I saw, there it is. I'm physically painting the memory versus the articulation of something abstract as a memory.
I think because so much of my work has been musically influenced, and so much of my love of music has meant taking in all sorts of cultural feeding. I mean, I love music from all over the world, And when you listen to, I'm not a huge fan of lyrics anymore. I really have I've grown into a place of, appreciating music that isn't lyric laden. Sorry to my friends that are songwriters and lyricists, but there's a lot of strife in the lyrics, and we see it all around. I mean, racism is a really, really big issue, a very, very big issue. And it comes out when you're listening hard to cultural music. But you want to hear the beauty of the music too, and it's a vehicle to express what's happening and how to, like plead to the world. We got to change this. We got to make it different. So
this particular piece is an ode to swing.
Yeah, this is also a diptych, and I was very intrigued by the song "Oh Lady Be Good" and how it could be played in different modes. And so this is swing mode. I do love jazz, and then I intended to keep this series going, and hearing this one song be played in many different jazz modalities. And so, this is the one that I felt had a bit of swing. And I want to mention that I also have this, I'm going to go back to the synesthesia, the reference that I make sometimes to the colors that I feel when I hear particular sounds or chords or just pitches. And this is also an ode to D major. And if you look up in the upper left-hand corner of the painting, there's a blue leaf that kind of shoots up in that corner, and a little yellow ochre triangle. I don't know if you're seeing it the same orientation I do.
I do.
But directly underneath it is written the abbreviation for D major. I don't know if you can see that. There's a little
right here.
There you go. So you hit on just go up a little bit.
Yeah.
And there is the roughly right to the right of the cursor is the D for D major, and the M for major, and the A, J, and the dot over the J.
Very nice.
That kind of notation appears throughout my work. There'll always be some musical reference or notation symbols or whatever. It just is a way to remind me of what I was listening to at the time, what I was doing at the time, what I was focusing on, and how I was playing that on cello. So
I love that, Leslie.
pretty simple. It's just a sketchbook, really. And so this is same one, "Oh Lady Be Good" in bebop mode, or style. So it just felt very beboppy. And I won't belabor the subject, but this one has references for me to this song played in bebop.
Ooh, I like it. So I ask this question, and I don't want to put you on the spot, and I just, if you had a short answer.
Okay.
I know that you've kind of articulated, because I don't want you to have to get too heady in thinking how you might answer it. Why do you paint?
I paint because it is not any different to me than eating, walking, sleeping, reading, listening. It's a thing I do, like all other things that I do for locomotion in life and expression in life. And I don't know what I'd do if I didn't paint.
There you go.
I have thought very much about that question, I can tell you, because my grandmother went blind from macular degeneration. My mother has macular degeneration now and is fortunately able to use medication to arrest that. I imagine I probably will have it. I'm trying to paint all I can before I'm not able to see the pain. I don't know what I'm going to do then. Music, picking up music was a way to keep that ability to use my senses and abilities through that, if that's what happens.
To resonate creatively, you have to have something that you can connect to. Wow,
Yes.
that's beautifully said. Thank you. And then my last question is, if you had advice to artists that are striving to be, that might be at the beginnings of their journeys, you know, a year or even 5 years into it, what would you say to them? I mean, we live in such a different world now, and the approach to making art can sometimes feel phonetic. Do you have any advice?
Just the same advice that's given to me in the thing that I'm learning to do. You know, I've been learning to play cello, and the practical advice is play your scales every day. Don't ever stop playing your scales, no matter what you want to do. That's how I feel about anybody wishing to go into art in whatever way. You just have to do it. You make marks. You find people that can help you make your marks more interesting. You you listen a lot to what people have to say about their experiences. Read all you can about those experiences. Go to museums, stare, and then make notes. I just went to a museum last weekend, the Norton Simon, with one of my girlfriends and her granddaughter, who had not been in a museum before. And we walked in, she's 9 years old. And I said, I just want you to, like I do with all students that I've taken to museums, you go look at everything and you be prepared to tell me one thing that you really loved and why. That's it.
And why?
And then I gave her a set of paints as her birthday gift, and she went about making a really fabulous painting.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, it's been, any closing thoughts you'd like to say before I say goodbye to the audience here?
No, except to thank you very much for doing this, because this is another form of, you know, advocation for all artists that, you know, want to learn something new or ditch something old.
Or
You know,
ditch
they may listen to this and go, ah, old news, I'm out of here. That's okay too. Ditching is part of advancing. So this is great what you do. Thank you.
I just want, it's kind of my passion project. I want to know what artists are thinking, and I want other artists to learn what artists are thinking, because I feel in so many ways we now live in this, everything's kind of on this surface. You know, we've got this little phone where we're looking at images and comparing and contrasting, and there's just so much more depth that we forget.
It's true.
We forget.
It's true. Yeah, I have a love-hate with those devices, but I don't know what I would do if I couldn't be looking at artwork all the time. It's fantastic that we can. I just would like it to not be so littered with
Leslie, how
advertising.
can people find you? I'm going to put your website on the bottom
Okay.
of these notes, and probably some of the references of Chester Arnold and
Awesome. Okay.
others.
So
Anything else?
leslieallenartist.com or studio300a.com. Either one gets me. Email, Instagram, Leslie Allen Abstract Artist with underscores between those words. Telephone calls, well, that's easy to find on the website, Insta, and Facebook. And I'm in the ICB in Studio 300A, and we, as Artists Association, we are now holding 3 to 4 times a year Artist at Work events, and I suggest that people come and visit those, because those are, you know, not really clean up your studio and make it a gallery, but instead come in, watch us work, ask us questions, watch a process, just observe.
Oh, this is in Sausalito, California, in a
That's right.
Liberty Ship building.
That's right.
Industrial Center Building, ICB. That's wonderful. So you don't do a thing. You just keep painting and let people walk in.
That's right. That's right.
I love it. This is Inside of the Mind of an Artist, and I thank you all for joining us. Leslie Allen, and I'm Lauren Montecon.